Hi Carl, lovely to meet up with you and begin working on your game. Just a quick recap of the key points that we covered during your first visit. We spoke about the positioning of the feet at setup. So setup, position 1, P1, both feet a little bit too square, which is pointing the knees inwards just a little bit too much, which in turn restricts your ability to turn your hips on a tilted angle. When we get that sort of setup, we often see that little bump off and a little bit of hip sway, so the hips moving or the pelvis moving away from the target a little bit during the backswing. That's also typical of a player who is maybe trying to keep the arms and the hands in front of him. When we look at it from down the line, arms trying to go out, we're chatting about what he'd been working on previously. When the arms go out, the club starts to drop behind your hands and the pelvis will move off the ball a little bit, as seen from face on. These are all things that we can work on in future sessions, just trying to tidy up. Big problem would be in transition, so from P4, top of the backswing, to P5 is really where it's at for you. Because of the move off the ball on the way back, the amount of linear movement that it can create, so how far forward and how soon you can get the pelvis moving towards the target in the downswing becomes a little bit limited. So the first thing you've got to do from face on is flex forward and move across. So almost like a lunge back across. When you do that, the shaft tends to get quite steep. The act of flexing forward and moving back across and lunging back across, if you will, is pulling the left arm out, and it's creating a situation at P5, so when the left arm's parallel with the floor, the shaft is through the right shoulder, and accumulator 3, which is the back of the left hand, has started to release a little bit too early. So there's a definite link between what the back of the left hand does and the positioning of the shaft at P5. So the feeling that we talked about in transition is demonstrated by you here, and it's almost like you see with Sergio Garcia. I want you to feel like your hips are sliding towards the target, and accumulator 3, the back of the left hand, is loading more. So we want the hips sliding, not quite as much of a flex forward, but importantly we want accumulator 3 to be more loaded rather than being released. So if it's loaded, it would look like this. If it's released, it would look like this. And the condition of accumulator 3, the back of the left hand, affects where the shaft hits you on the body at P5. So from P4 to P5 is the area that you want to be concentrating on more than anything. Here's your swing towards the end of the session. We're trying to liven up the lower body in regards to moving linear rather than flexing forward. And we're trying to feel like accumulator 3 is loaded more. The move from the top, the flexing forward, which should happen, is not quite as pronounced. So there's no problem flexing forward and regaining the flex in the pelvis at that point, but we don't want it to be as pronounced. So you see that the knees don't square up quite as fast. There's a little bit more movement towards the target with the pelvis. And accumulator 3 is in a different position. Hence it hits below the right shoulder rather than on or ever so slightly below it at the start. So completely different condition of accumulator 3. Back of the gloved hand is loaded more as opposed to being released. There is then a knock-on effect in regards to the rest of the swing. Instead of being steep on the left and trying to shallow it throughout the hit, we're now gradually shallowing throughout the downswing. You can see the shaft starts to get onto the right forearm a little bit sooner. By the time we get to position 6, which is shaft parallel with the ground, instead of the sweet spot being out in front of the hands, sweet spot's now inside the hands. Delivery of the club into the ball is less straight lined, so it's now coming from the inside, swings directed out to the right a little bit more, and there is less of a need to stand up through the hit. The move that you make through the ball where you lose your inclination to the ground, so you can see you've got a certain amount of forward bend, P5.5, and you're now going to see that forward bend diminish dramatically. So we're standing very straight as we come through the ball. That is an attempt to shallow out the swing because we're too steep at P5. As you become shallower at P5, like you see on the right, there will be less of a need to make the move that you're making. So you put a box around your head. This is not going to happen overnight. This is going to be a gradual process that we may have to look at in subsequent sessions. But at the moment, we're removing the need to do it. You can see already that you start to come up and out that box at a slightly more gradual rate. Still make that move, but it's more gradual because there's less of a need to do that. It'll be really interesting to see that how that looks next time we get together. Plenty of work on P4 to P5. Don't get distracted. Really get that move in there. There are going to be some subtle changes that are going to need to make. You know, at the minute, you know how to deliver the club to the back of the ball based on what you're seeing on the left-hand side of your screen. What we've got to do is hit enough shots now to get feels and the timing involved, or the timing required to deliver the club from that improved position that you see on the right-hand side, where the shaft is shallowing gradually throughout the time and space of the downswing. Good luck with it. Have a great Christmas and look forward to kicking on in 2017. Well done.